The St. Louis Blues go for bloodlines. Jimmy Snuggerud is their first-round pick. His father played in the NHL. His grandfather represented the United States in the 1964 Olympics. Josh Hyman of Locked On Blues is with us to discuss the pick. I'm Gil Martin of Locked On NHL. With me, Brendan Pillar of Locked On Senators, talking prospects. Josh, your initial thoughts about the Snuggerud pick?
I'm really excited. I talked about early on my podcasts the past few days, just if the Blues were going to go for a forward, it was more than likely going to be a guy that was going to take a few years to develop just because their forward core is so strong now. And that's exactly the route they went. They went for a very high upside player, a guy that has shown a lot of prominence in his shot, but lacking a little bit in other areas of his game. But he is a very undersized guy when it comes to his frame. He can definitely grow into his frame a lot like that, and having a lethal shot like he does allows him to take some time to grow into his playmaking in other areas. I'm really happy with the pick. I think there's a good chance that he could develop into a star in this league, and I think when you're a team with the forward core as good as the Blues, you can take a chance on a guy like that might take a few years to develop.
Brandon, how long do you think he will take to develop?
Well, the interesting thing with Jimmy Snuggerud is he's a Minnesota guy, and he's committed to the University of Minnesota. You mentioned his dad, Gil. He was the captain of the University of Minnesota, and those guys love playing there. So I wouldn't be surprised if he tries to milk that experience and get a bunch of years at that university. But that's not to say that if the Blues feel like he is ready and he's someone they can bring into their system and maybe play a middle six or bottom six role to kind of be able to fit under the cap when they're still in a competitive range here, he's someone that can do that because, like you mentioned, Josh, his shot is what really makes him great. Like, he's able to use his shot from a long range, and like right from the faceoff dot, he'll just let it rip, and he has no issues beating goalies from a long range. So I could see him being used on a second power play unit to really be the finisher, to be the guy that they cycle the puck around and then let him finish the job on a second power play unit. And I think he's someone that's also going to play responsibly on defense as well. Anytime you get players coming from the USN TDP, they're going to be well coached all around. And it's sure, maybe he was someone that played a little bit lower down on that lineup, but I think if you give him a little bit more space to flourish where he's not kind of covered by these better prospects, you can have a really nice player from Jimmy Snuggerud. So I think the St. Louis Blues did a great job here, and they get great value.
Josh, now that they've added Snuggerud, you talked about the depth up front. Short term, what do the Blues look to do from here?
Yeah, it's interesting. They have some interesting roadblocks in front of them. There was a Frank Cervelli tweet that kind of slipped under the radar yesterday that mentioned that Vladimir Tarasenko has not rescinded his trade request, which was something that a lot of Blues fans, including myself, kind of assumed that he had, and that he still looked to move on. And I recorded a podcast today that sounded exactly like every podcast I recorded last summer because the talks of Tarasenko trades are still exactly where they are a year ago. Like I said, it was something that I assumed was over and done with, maybe a little too naively, but they've definitely got a bit of an interesting summer ahead of them. And the Snuggerud pick kind of reaffirms that, picking a guy that would potentially fill exactly what Vladimir Tarasenko does. Like you mentioned, his shot and his ability to finish on the power play. You think of a guy on the Blues who can do that now, and the first name that comes to mind is Vladimir Tarasenko. So I think it's going to be a very interesting summer for the St. Louis Blues. They still have a forward core that can compete with any core in the NHL, and Jordan Binnington had a huge resurgence in the playoffs. So I look for them to compete next season. They got a lot of young guys that can potentially crack the roster as well. So it's going to be an interesting retool of an offseason, but I expect them to be right there in the race next year.
All right. Well, for more on the Blues, you can watch Locked On Blues with Josh Hyman. And Josh, thanks so much for stopping by.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.